All right.
Alrighty.
So listen, hey, Ron, we don't have our master of ceremonies, Craig, so we're always kind of lost when we start this thing with without the man, the legend, Craig Olmstead. I mean, it's just hard to do.
It's a tough act to follow, but let me just start off by saying, hey, Doug, happy Friday. How are you doing?
Man, I'm doing great, but things are getting ready to get better.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought you would say. So that's why, why don't we do this? We got a real special guest today. We got a special day, and we have actually two special people that are happy to be married. And there will be, which is interesting as it is. But, let's just talk about our friend and our consultant, our very, very good friend, and our, which is Ron Garber for a minute. Let's talk about Ron.
Sure.
And what do you have to say about Ron?
So Ron Garber is without a doubt one of the, he's a very cool, calm, collective guy. He never uses his hands to talk. No, I'm just love this guy. Love him. And bottom line is that Ron has got one of the biggest hearts and desires to make sure that people succeed. And he's excitable when he comes to people that want to win. And he's always behind those people who want to win. So when I think of Ron, I think of a person who is wanting the best for people, and that's what I think. And of course, he's all about the data.
Well, I've known him for 30 years and started out with him in the business. He was a realtor. I was a branch manager and a loan officer, and started working with him. And I've learned a lot, and we've grown a lot together over 30 years. Had a lot of phenomenal experiences, and I think in this last 3 years together, the one thing that I've learned about him is that he has had the ability to really adapt to something I think he has found and has so much passion about, which is contributing to others and helping those people find what matters to them, helping them accelerate, helping them build their confidence, helping them find out what their purpose is, find out what they like, find out how they need to improve, and helping them to stay hyper focused on consulting them to kind of get rid of the lies, get rid of the excuses, and get down to tear away all those layers to find out what makes you tick and what is important and what really matters in your life. And Garber has done a phenomenal job in finding that in his passion to do that for other people. And that's what he does for us.
Yeah.
And with that, I'd
100%, man. And let's get it started, because I know his secret weapon, and that's the Dr. Sherry. He's smarter than all of us. He married up way above his limit there.
He sure did. So let's do this, Doug. Why don't we bring in
Ron,
Garber,
Mr. Garber,
and then Garber, we're gonna hand it off to you. First of all, thank you, brother, for being here today.
Go, buddy.
Hand it off to you to invite our very, very special guest. So, Ron, it's over to you, my friend.
Didn't see that first part coming, right? Didn't see that coming. This is kind of a proud moment, proud day, and thank you for that. Thank you for what you said. And again, part of this is the brotherhood of what we've done together and how we've all grown, and I've learned so much from both of the two of you. But today is special. And I'll just first I'm excited that we have both sales and ops folks on today's call, because this is, we do seminars, events, Momentum Mondays, Power Hours, speaker series. Today is actually a shift in how you think, right? And it requires a whole different mentality of what this is. And it requires a lot of practice, and it requires change. And so one of the things that I'd like you to do, right, and I hopefully you can see this. This is not real complicated. It's a piece of paper. So if you can grab a piece of paper, if you got something next to you, it's simple. It's a big letter I, and on the very top is a number 10. On the very bottom is a 0, and then on the side it's 1 through 9 all the way up to the top, right? So if you can quickly grab a piece of paper, whatever you got, and draw this little diagram, I with 0 through 10, okay, that's the first part. And if by chance you have your business plan near you, or if you don't, I'd like you to keep this part in mind. the page, and I believe it's number 5, that is the skill assessment. I'd like you to keep in mind, or look at it, which would be the best thing. Look at that page of the skills that you have and things that you've done, because it'll actually help you, with this exercise. But this whole thing is about psychology, positive solutions, positive focus. And Dr. Sherry's tagline it's real simple. It's 3 words, and I'd actually write this one down as well. What's going well? It's a different mentality. So with that, and I got to tell you, thank you for what you both said. I have had a transformation because I've integrated a lot of what she teaches. Do I fall backwards? I do, but I work diligently to follow the philosophy of what you're going to learn today about the scaling tool. So with that, I'd like to bring Dr. Sherry up. One thing I'd like to ask, and this is something that we'll do at the end, Kate Campbell and myself, if you hear something as a loan officer, as a leader, or somebody in the ops that supports, I'd like you, we're going to send out a little survey, and if you see that there's something that Dr. Sherry is discussing, talking about, and you said to yourself, God, I'd like to hear more about this through the channel of how I live in business. What I'd like is when you get this little small survey, that'll be 1 question or 2, is the goal is, would you like to hear more of the Dr. Sherry philosophy from where you live in business, loan officer, leader, or somebody that supports an ops? So you'll get that coming. So with that, very proud today to support Love Like Crazy. And again, I believe in what she does and what she thinks and what she teaches. So with that, Dr. Sherry.
Thank you, Ron.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today because this topic, or the scaling tool that we're going to be using today, is one of my favorite tools that I use across the board. And I find what I'm hoping that I always kind of like to think about, like, in our time together, what am I hoping is your greatest takeaway? And my greatest hope is for you to begin the process of looking at business planning, or whether you want to call it business or strategic planning, with a new set of ideas. So I do have a PowerPoint slide, just because there are certain, like Ron had you draw the capital I with a 10 on the top and a 0 at the bottom, because we're going to be adding to that so that it's something for you to, have with you as you're reviewing page 5 or page 6 in your business plan. I do recommend, or I really encourage you to make this an experiential time, because I think it'll give you data that you need to use when you're putting together your business plan for 2022. So let me share my screen. Okay. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So today, what I want to be talking about are solution-focused and positive psychology success strategies. What Ron said is a little bit wrong. My 3 favorite words are what went well. Not what's going well, but what went well. And the reason why I like to focus on that, I start most of my therapy sessions that way. I start most of my coaching sessions that way, because I think sometimes the things that go well get lost in the background. So I think would be fun to kind of start today is for you right now to write down 1 or 2 things that have gone well this week. What went well? What happens from a positive psychology standpoint is that when you begin to activate positive emotions about what went well, it's really easy for us to, in our minds, go through all the things that don't go well. But when we begin the process of activating positive emotions, we are more curious, and we actually are better problem solvers. And so I think it's a really good way to start your day or end your day, what went well. just because it's a way to activate this different way of kind of thinking. So again, what I just said is, what are 3 things that went well this week? So if everybody has their, let me get my click here, sorry. Okay, so we have this scaling tool that Ron talked about, and this is what it looks like. This is what we're going to start with. And I'm going to ask you a question then related to this scaling tool. For your business today, on a scale of 0 being the worst year you have ever had, and 10 being the best year you've ever had, what number would you give yourself as you think about the success of your business this year? When you decide the number, I want you to draw a horizontal line from the number, whatever number that is, across, because I'm going to have you write some additional things in there. Okay, so you've got your number, a horizontal number across the top. Now, the question I want to ask you is this. What is working well to get you to your selected number for this year? What is working well? What are some of the things that you've done that have given you success this year? There's another way to say it. What are you already doing on a consistent basis to get you to that number? Another question might be, where do you excel? You know, what strategies did you use that contributed to your success this year? But, you know, was there an effort or an activity or tasks that you've done consistently to get to that number for this year? And I just want you to know that if you're having a hard time coming up with this kind of this focus, and you're having a kind of a hard time kind of coming up with stuff, there's nothing wrong with that. It just means that I'm just giving you some new thoughts as to how do you view yourself and your business. And sometimes it's for some people, it's not as easy as it is for others, but it's just for you to think about, how can I begin the process of thinking about how I work well on a consistent basis. Last one, is there anything else? Okay, so we've got the first part of the scaling tool done. We're looking at where your business is today. You have a line going from the number across the page, and below that number, you're writing down the things that you're doing well, or you have done well this year at America First. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to ask you about, can you think of a time in your business, kind of looking at examples of your past successes, that you would rate yourself higher on the scale? For those of you that are newer in business, or even 10%, just one notch, can you think of a time when you were doing business at a higher success, you know, with higher success, or you felt better about your business? What I want you to do is draw the line, again, a horizontal line, and again, focused on what went well. You know, I like to look at it this way: when it was just when you're doing just a little, you know, just a little more on point, you were closer to, you know, meeting the goals, the things that you wanted. What were you doing then that gave you a little bit higher success on the scale? Is there anything that, when you think about it from this perspective, that you were doing differently? Maybe it was something that you did more frequently that you aren't doing now. Life's gotten busier for some reason. You know, if you think about in the past too, sometimes when we get so busy, and I think with COVID too, it's been kind of isolating for a lot of people. So in the past, how did others support your progress? And then if you could just put in a couple of adjectives that describe how you felt when you were at that higher number. It's hard to do pacing when I can't see anybody's face. Okay. So now that we have your scale with activities that you've done that have gotten to where you were, as successful today, then we have a list of a couple things that you may have done in the past that even gave you a bump up even by 10%. So I want you to think about those two things now, what things that you're doing well and some of the things that you may need to do a little more frequently as you're looking at your business plan for 2022. But I want you now on this scale is to write down, I don't put it on the scale because I don't know what number you want, but on this scale, what is your goal number for 2022? Now, the interesting thing about this number is that this number, I mean, this could be another conversation, but a number that's written down but doesn't have any action steps with it tends to be a wish. And then what happens with a wish is that you don't follow up with things and you get discouraged. And so my goal is for you with this next question then is to not make this number be a wish or something that you really hope for, but in fact, it's there's actual steps that you can take to make this an implementable for your business plan or your strategy for 2022.
Sure, can I ask you a question real quick? So if you've got folks on this call that are both sales and then you got folks on the ops side,
yeah,
is this something that could be interactive between, both sales and ops actually sitting and talking and discussing together?
100%. This tool is the coolest tool in the sense that you can sit down with your ops person and you can say, when we work together, how do you think we work together on a scale from 0 to 10? 10 meaning we just get along great. 0 means we just are like, oh God, arch enemies, basically. So you figure out what number that you are, and then you start writing down all of the things that you do well to work together. And oftentimes what happens when we're calling and we're getting we're fussy or angry or someone's upset with us about a file, you don't spend the time to think about the things that go well. So you spend some time on this kind of a scaling tool and you say, how is it that we work well together? What can I do to bump it up even 10%? What can you do to bump it up even 10%? The coolest thing about this tool as well is you can take this tool and use it in your selling business. Remember 2 weeks ago when I was talking about how do you ask questions focusing on what people do well? You can sit down with this scale. You can say, let's look at, your business last year. What number would you rank it? And then you can just ask the exact same questions that I've asked you here. And if you're listening really well to what went well, but how they want to bump it up even 10%, that's where you fill the gap in with the products and services that you guys offer. It's a perfect tool because people like to talk about what they do well, but we spend most of our day not talking about the things that go well. So again, this is
I think to Sherry's point, if you look at it, it works for a leader working with loan officers. It works with loan officers working on ops. It works with loan officers working with their real estate agents in the field. It's a concept. It's a positive concept that is maybe one of the greatest of consulting, opportunities for everybody that plays. Anyway, thank you. Just want to share that.
Okay. So, so we have your number listed up here in red. So now the next step, which is really the last step in this process, is for you to go future forward. The coolest thing about going future forward, as we call it in Solution Focus, is that in the future there isn't any problems. And so what happens when you go future forward, how will you, thinking about this next year and the number that you want to get to where the number that you are, how will you notice you have reached that number? And then I want you to write some of this on this side. How will you know you've reached that number? What are some of the things that you've done? A couple questions I have is, what are 2 things you'll be doing differently to reach your 2022 goal? Another way to ask it is, what 2 strategies will you add to get to your goal? Another one is time management, is time blocking or focus time needed, so that you can use your time more proactively versus reactively. So I love words, and time management is not a great word for me, but time blocking is a good word for me, or focus time is good for me. So kind of think of a word that works for you, and think about when you've used that tool to manage time, what were you doing? And again, we go back to support. What support, if any, do you need to reach your phone number? Does anybody have any questions? We need more time.
I think people are
I
thinking.
saw, I
of-
saw that Cooper had written in here at the beginning when you were going through what did some things that have happened this year that have helped you. He said leveraging relationships.
Okay.
So that was I think he was interactively putting this on there. So that was good.
And feel free, if
Thank you.
anybody has some thoughts, some ideas, some questions, do feel free to write them in the chat so that she can address them as she finishes her presentation. But please think things through or ask some questions. We want this to be interactive.
Mhm.
Yeah, Sherry, I can tell you, you took me through a mental, I keep thinking it's still 2020 for some reason, like 2021, I can't even believe it's almost over. But it was like, wow, I was going back and thinking of all the things that we've accomplished just here today. And then I
Mhm.
started going back, what's happened in this year? And then where did I want to, where was it one time when I was just maybe been on 10 or 15% better,
This
things
is-
were
yeah.
cranking. And I was going back, and I went back 15, 16 years,
Okay.
and to a time when things just seemed to be gelling really, really well. And what was different back then. And
Do you have an example?
oh yeah, I was had my own company at the time, and I was in
Okay.
front of Wall Street, and I was in front of rating agencies, and I was putting out product, and things were moving, and they had an automated underwriting engines, and I was, everything that we had done, we were executing on. I had 2 or 3 divisions that I brought on, multi-billion dollars in business, and it was
Wow.
just everything had kind of peaked, and it was a one of those things where you just kind of realized that all the work you got realized. So I think a lot of times when we're doing goals, and I stole this one from Anthony Robbins, but he always says it's everybody overestimates sometimes what they can do in a year,
Mhm.
and they underestimate what they can do in a decade.
Mm.
And from the perspective of goal planning is like these things we're doing every day. What are the 2 or 3 things that are going to leverage me up to the next level? What are the next year? What are those next 2 or 3 strategies I'm going to implement? And then all of a sudden, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, it's like, wow, I'm an overnight success, right? So it's crazy. These are just.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you one more
Sure.
question based on what you just said,
Absolutely.
which is what I really love about the scaling tool?
Yeah.
When you were talking about, the things that you were doing when your business was just a little bit better, how did you feel as you were thinking about that?
I actually felt unstoppable.
Yeah, that's why this, like, we resonate, we kind of get into that mode.
Right.
And how often do we have a chance to get into that mode? So you can
Right.
begin to see that if you have this type of a conversation between sales and ops, if you have this conversation with somebody that you're working with, how can we grow the business together in the yellow? It just feels good. And so then when just remember, when you have positive emotions that are in the forefront, we are better problem solvers, and we're far more creative than we are when we're angry, or we've got we're disgruntled for the day or something.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that's
I just go back 4 years when
Mhm.
myself and Ron and Jamie and a core team started at AmeriFirst, And it was like, wow, this is like a whole new start, fresh. And we got a whole chart of things. But first thing we had to do was first things first. We had to get a lease. We had to get some furniture. We had to get these things in place. Had to get a loan officers that all thought had the same cultural view of where we wanted to take things. And it was then, you fast forward 4 years from now, I think we did, 50, 60 million, maybe the first few months. And then last year, we were able to bolt on it from the Southeast and Southwest, I don't know, $1.5 billion worth of business. So,
Wow.
it moves because of not trying to get too overexcited where you want to be in 1 year, but what can I do over the next 3 to 4? Now we're doing annual planning today,
Right.
but I want to make sure everybody thinks about it is that let's get realistic of what we want to accomplish, how we want to accomplish it, and realize that this is a journey, and we've got a journey of 2, 3, 5 years here to go before we get to maybe the ultimate goal. So that's why I love what you're doing here. Because it really makes you mentally get into where you want to
Sure,
be.
I got an example, and I got 4 or 5 of them that just click in my brain. And this one is about new loan officers coming aboard to the company, and I've gone through this a lot of times when I actually interview them, and I say these people are just talented, and what they did in their past is remarkable, and the skill sets that they've got that brought them to this new career, this new table, is just remarkable. They start out looking at themselves like, I'm not a loan officer. I don't know. How am I going to do it? I can't compete. And again, I think it's perspective as well, is you can use this to say, even though I'm new, even though, I'm coming to this table, whatever, they still come to the table with remarkable things they've done from their past. And they have such incredible support. And it doesn't matter whether you're brand new or you've been in the business for 100 years like a Doug and a Ron. It doesn't matter. He's got a perspective of where he is and from where he came from. But I got to tell you, when I talk to new incredible loan officers who have been in this business a short time, and there's a few that just come to mind, you can say to yourself, man, I was great at this thing from my past. I really learned these skills that I can carry forward. And so this works great for reminding yourself that, you know what? Yeah, there's a lot of loan officers out there that have skills, but you know what? What I bring to this table makes me a phenomenal consultant. And so, I just wanted to throw that in.
But I think if you would say that, you'd say these are the things that I've done well, which is on the blue line.
Yeah.
You can go with the manager, and you can look at the paper and say, these are we want to bump your business up. I see you've got some really great skills. However, I think maybe if you learn whatever training, I know you guys have great training stuff, but these are some of the trainings that I think that would be really good to fill in some of the gaps for the things that you already do well.
Right.
And so then all of a sudden you've got an agreement and then when are we going to have this done? And those are the ways that you can begin the process of having conversations with what other tools people need, instead of saying you're not doing a good job, but you better go watch this video or you're not going to be fired on Monday. It's just a very different way of having somebody from the very beginning lay out their skills, start focusing on what they do well, and how do you fill in the gap as a leader.
So I'm working the queue here, and Doug, I am unstoppable. I feel that way today. Let's continue on that path of being unstoppable. Susan Claren says, if we do this exercise with our agents, many of whom do not get coaching, is there a trick to getting them to actually commit to time blocking and accountability? It's a failure area for me with agents. Any feedback there, Dr. Sherry?
So when you're talking with somebody that's not as motivated as you are to do like time blocking in order to grow your business, you ask them, has there been a time in your career that you were able to, put blocks of time together that made it more effective for you. You let them do it. No one really likes to be told what to do. So it's the idea of inviting them to be curious on when they were doing it different. Has there been a time that you did this different? And in doing it different, did you notice a success? That person then has to draw back to a success with time blocking versus you telling them they need a time block, which people don't really like for you to do.
So in that particular case, you're using an anchoring technique, right? To bring them back to a time where they remember what success was like. And that kind of brings that memory current,
right,
present to what they're doing. So they get that feeling, they get emotionalized instantly because you put them back in a space where
right,
they were winning.
right.
And
so we don't
that
ever want to say the word better. We want to say different. Because different is different does not create emotion. It doesn't, like when are you doing better, when you're worse. Those are triggers for our emotions. We want to keep people in the logical space. So you say, where's a time in your career when you're doing it a little bit different that you can recall when,
when time blocking worked. And so when they do that, so let's take that full cycle. So
Okay.
they let's say in this case, Susan says that to the agent, and they
Okay.
remember this time when they were really feeling good about their time blocking. So what does she do? How does she then make that relevant right now? How does she?
Okay, so
pull
what
that
we
forward?
want to do, and anytime when we're having when somebody answers a question, we want to have them have more memory related to the question. So what did you notice yourself doing when you did that? Did you notice you had more free time? What were you able to do when you were time blocking that you aren't able to do like now? What would be the benefit of it? I mean, back then, what was the benefit of doing that? When you stopped doing it, what did you notice as it related to your scheduling? What do you think would happen if you started doing it again? Is there a better word for you? I hate time management word. That makes me mad. If Ron thinks he's going to time manage me, we're like, wow. So it's better.
If he tells you to do anything, he's going to have a problem.
Yeah,
frankly.
so I don't like time management. So but I like time blocking. And I liked in that time block then to do whatever it is that I'm doing. So that's a better word for me. I love now that Apple calls it focus. It's really kind of cool for me because it's an inviting thing versus somebody telling me I have to do something. So I think those are the types of conversations you want to focus on and get a rich textured story on how it was different. Because as they're re-experiencing the difference, then they might be willing to grasp that. How is it that they can add that back in? And it may not be at that moment. It could be like later when they're driving home.
Right. So you're bringing it all right front and center. So it's, you're going back to the experience, you're having them recall the experience, describe the experience, and then say, and today, what would you be able to do differently that would be similar to what you did before? Mm-hmm. They actually solve their own problem by walking
100%.
them through that. And that's 100%. What you're looking to do.
100%. So then you don't have to have fear, which is one of the biggest things that gets in the way of business planning. You don't have fear because you don't have to solve it.
Beautiful. And that
you don't
that
have to
works.
solve it.
I hope that answers your question, Susan. Next one from anonymous attendee. How often would you recommend anyone using this tool? Should this be a daily routine? ?
I think that's a really good question. It depends on if you can do this tool monthly to see how you're approaching you can ask all kinds of questions of it. So let's just say that you want to sell a certain number of units over the course of the year. So at the beginning of every month, you kind of look at where you are, what number do you think that your business is at, and going back up to the green, because I oftentimes find the green area on the things that that you could do to get your business to grow, you don't do because you get into a reactive state. So you can do it that way. You could say, how did my day go yesterday? I had a 4 yesterday. Well, what made it at least a 4? And if you say my number was a 0, then I always say, well, how did you cope? Because that's still a strength.
And would you recommend, Sherry, perhaps what they do is they're going along and you use the reactive day versus a proactive day. And in some portion of that day, you may have some of it being reactive because a loan blows up and now you're reacting to the loan. Is it helpful, do you think, for them to kind of at the end of the day kind of grade themselves on being proactive or reactive during the day to say, I spent X percentage of my day being proactive, I spent 20% of my day being reactive, and maybe they can keep a scorecard at least? Do you recommend they do something like that?
Well, these are, yeah, I think those are really good questions. And I have a slide about a reactive day versus a proactive day. I do think
Okay.
that those are the two of the biggest things to get fear and being reactive all day are the two things that get in the way of following through on a business plan or a business strategy that you have for the year.
Why don't you keep moving? Because I think you're going to get to a lot of these questions by some of the slides you got coming up.
Okay, but I don't.
We got through those questions.
We did?
We are clear, and back to you, and we'll step out of the way again.
Okay, let me finish this up there. Okay. So I think the next thing that I want to talk about is while we all have this idea of what we want to achieve, how do we overcome possible challenges that get in your way? I always use the word challenge instead of problem because challenge kind of puts shoulders back. The word problem puts shoulders down. So how are we going to overcome possible challenges that get in the way? And so the thing that I think the two biggest challenges from the coaching and the things that I've done is that many people get stuck in a reactive day. And so, you know, we start out here, you get a call from a customer with a problem or an insistent demand. This works for ops as well. You put out the fire and you're, you know, how's your frame of mind? And then you get a next call from a customer with a problem or an insistent demand, because people usually call you when there's a problem or an insistent demand. And then you put out that fire. And so I kind of look at like this happens, this reactive cycle that we get into. I want you to kind of think about it. How much of your day is reactive? And reactive is what I mean is reacting to what your customer needs. Now, you are in a customer service position. So yes, you do need to deal with challenges that your customers are facing. But my thought for you is how many times do you go around this circle or this cycle before you blast off at an ops person? You know, that's another conversation, but you know, I'm saying how many times do you go around this circle? How much does this type of day impact your sales growth strategies? You know, how much time each day do you spend this way before your mood actually shifts? And you're like, I'm not going to call anybody. I'm not proactive today because I've had a horrible day. It's just been a reactive day all day. So your day now is determined by who is calling you and telling you what they want. You're no longer in control of your day. You're reacting all throughout the day. So what I'm suggesting is that, you know, how many days in a row does this happen? And then you lose sight that you have clients that are happy that are working with you, that things that are going well. I think the interesting thing in the research is it shows that really, if you look at your customer base, about 10% or so have complaints or have urgent issues. And so there are two other categories of people, business as usual or happy clients. Why don't they call? Oftentimes because your clients assume that it's just supposed to work out that way. So there's no need to call, or it's like, thank God file where you just don't have to deal with anything and everything's fine. You know, you think about in your own life, how often do you go up to a restaurant manager at the end and tell them how great the meal was? No, you're going to complain if your meal had something wrong. There's only the percentage of people that complain to the percentage of people that give compliments is skewed. That's why surveys are always interesting, because people that do surveys call when they write a survey when they're complaining, not so much about when they're happy or when they're content. So how much of your day is in this reactive mode, which then changes your mood, and you don't carve out time, if it was even 15 minutes, to carve out 15 minutes to call and be proactive to start building your business, or at least calling a client that you work with that likes to work with you, so that you get some positive feedback, so you're not in this negative kind of reactive cycle all day, because it truly does. Research has shown that it does impact your mood.
You know, and here's just a comment. And I'm doing this with my real estate hat on. So the borrower's aggravated, then the real estate agent gets aggravated, and then I throw it to the lender who gets aggravated, who then moves it over to the processor and underwriter who get aggravated. So there's kind of a chain of how this thing all happens, and it can actually be compounded, right? So the deal is as you're actually looking at this and you say, man, how many of these things are kind of rolling downhill fast? And who is it? So it's actually, it gives you good perspective on how it's happening and who's it happening to and who's it affecting, right? Which is also, I think, very important. It's a good slide.
And then you can start seeing where everybody's aggravated with each other because you've got all of these demands. I mean, the conversations aren't really very friendly at that point, you know? And so it's the idea that you have control of your day. And so is there 15 minutes a day that you can carve out to call customers that you like to work with, customers that are happy with you, or finding new ways to drum up new business? Does that make sense?
Does. I've got a couple comments. Heather Slater says, she goes, I am known as a firefighter. All right. And then we have Susan, who asked the first question, says Michael Gerber in the E-Myth says entrepreneurs, which we are, easily move from fighting fires to being arsonists. I think of that often. So that is a lot of people in the firefighting mode, and we got to make sure they're also in the mode of not firefighting, right? And actually being proactive as well.
Right, because then you can take the
Or
scale out.
being maybe
Go ahead.
being as, I know Bergen and I always talk about this, but being actually figuring out a strategy so that you're Smokey the Bear and preventing forest fires.
Mhm.
So that's even better.
That's that
All right.
proactive.
There you go.
Okay. So when we look at, then we go back then, so we spend a lot of our days in reactive mode. And so how is it that you can carve out some time? And you can look at sales books and they talk about how business grows exponentially even at, 15, 20, 30 minutes a day. So when we look at these activities that I have here that you listed on the green slides, when we kind of look at the green activities, those are oftentimes proactive activities that you will do in order to reach your goal for 2022. So being reactive all day long is not going to help you grow your business. And so it's the idea, if you want to have a kind of a business plan growth trajectory, you need to do some proactive work. So even making one call a day to a long-time customer, and one of the things you could say is, did you know question? If you're really busy, you could just say, hi, blah, 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 did you know? And again, you've created your own proactive tips. I think keeping a list of things that you can do proactively on days that you're struggling, so that you can remind yourself what it is that you need to do that day, so you don't get stuck in that, whatever mood your clients are in, then it, or customers are in, then it impacts your ability to move your own business forward. So, so the last area that I think that gets in the way of working with your business plan and growing your business is fear. Does fear get in the way of any of these activities? And I think fear, I've worked for almost 30 years doing this, and fear is a conversation that I have all the time. Fear is fear getting in the way of your positive growth. I know that, if you think about what are your like 2 or 3 greatest fears when you think about sales or thinking about your business. What are 2 of your greatest fears? I think sometimes we don't examine them, and we don't examine them, they get bigger. I know that 2 common fears are failure. Failure is an interesting word because it's, an opposite of success, and no one really likes that feeling. Failure also feels final when we're looking at fear. And we often think there's little chance of coming back after a failure. So I think what happens when somebody says to you, no, do you perceive this as a failure? Some people do, some people don't, depending on personality types or just, how your day is going. And so what do you do to reframe this? Just to mean to yourself, reframing it means it's what, he or she doesn't want what I'm selling at this time, versus thinking it becomes like you personalizing it, that you're a failure. The other one I know that is a real big fear is rejection. What if he or she says no, and it often feels like rejection is something that we take personally. And no one likes to feel rejected personally because it just feels yucky. So, how can I help you then, knowing that we all face fear? It's interesting, if you think about fear, everybody you're working with has fear.
Yes, absolutely. Hey,
Everybody. Across the board, you're not going to meet your numbers or whatever. Everybody's got fear. So it's the idea, if we realize that everyone has fear, how could I help you have some kind of a fear minimizing strategy? because fear can create perfectionistic tendencies to delay action. What I find is really interesting about fear and perfectionism is they oftentimes hold hands, because when it's perfect is when you can send it out, versus what you need to say to yourself, I'm going to send it out when it's hopeful. You know, you're going to send something to somebody, but it's not perfect, you're not going to send it. Well, that's what fear can do. Another thing fear does is it encourages you to procrastinate, so you don't have to take unwanted action. I can procrastinate and play dumb games on my computer when I need to do something. So I do know that, you know, if I'm afraid to do something, I can procrastinate. I'll have you send an email instead of making a call or scheduling a visit. That's one of the things fear can do, because it's easier. You don't have to have face-to-face rejection. And it can also keep you from asking for business. And so I think the interesting thing with fear is that, you know, how can you combat it? And this is one of the best sentences that I know that you can use to help you with fear. I'm feeling like we're going to run out of time, so I got to hurry. Sorry. So oftentimes when we look at fear, comes from us. It comes from our own mind. It's something that comes in our head, and it is it's from our imagination. We should accept the fact that as human beings, that all of our fears are self-created. All of our fears are self-created. We feel fear by thinking and imagining negative things about uncomfortable situations or events. So I want to grow my business, and I want to call 10 new people today, and I have an inner fear by imagining what? Because what fear is, it's actually focusing on what might happen, and it's not 100% accurate that it will happen. This is a good tool for you to use. So when you write this out, I want to do this, but I have an inner fear by imagining. Remember, it's in your mind. You're thinking the worst thing's going to happen. That's what fear is. The best way to do it is take the last part of your sentence, the fearful outcome part of the sentence that you've just imagined, and convert it into something positive. Because when you do this, the statement switches fear and transforms it into a powerful positive belief about your preferred future. So those are my thoughts about what are the possible things that can get in the way, two possible things that can get in the way of business planning. And I hope that, you know, looking at what you do well, the proactive things that you know you can do to improve your business, and to look at fear and to look at reactivity, I'm hoping that it'll really help you kind of look at your business planning, your business strategy for 2022, just a different light.
Hey, Sherry, one of the things that I used to really got a lot out of it. I can't remember where I got this from, but it was the word feat, F-E-A-T, is an accomplishment. A D in front of a D is a going away from accomplishment. So when people are afraid that they're going to get turned down or rejected or whatever, that is just a defeat. You haven't gotten to the accomplishment. You're not destroyed. It's just a little bit of a defeat. We haven't gotten to the actual accomplishment yet. And so it's fear is also one of those things we've all heard different acronyms for, but a lot of it is false evidence appearing real, where we get stuff into our brain and come up with all the reasons it's not going to work.
Right.
Versus,
and they're all self-created. That's the thing about fear. It's self-created. I mean, it's a physiological response to danger. The challenge with that is the brain doesn't know whether danger is actually like a wild animal chasing you, or the fear of like a sales call or rejection or whatever it is. So it goes in at the same place. And so to stop and talk yourself through it and saying, you know, we're imagining negative things about uncomfortable situations or events. And that's really, if we break down fear, how could you turn it around to say, I want to do blank, and I have an inner fear by imagining. So you're talking to yourself in a way that says, I'm imagining this. So then it calms that physiological cycle. It's because you're imagining it. It's in your mind, because it's not.
And I also found that if you take action when you're feeling fear, and you actually do a positive momentum, immediately picking up the phone or immediately going into that office that you maybe been circling the neighborhood on. And just realize that, hey, there's no life danger. No, we're not like Navy SEALs that have people shooting bullets at us. We have mental bullets being shot at us.
Right.
But we're not going to die, guys. We're going to go in. We may have somebody that's not on their best behavior that day, and we had a defeat, which means we didn't have that accomplishment. So next day we may find that we have that accomplishment because, we just met somebody that was in a bad mood that day.
And I think
So-
that's the piece. It's like writing down your wins. We focus
Right.
on writing down
That's
your
right.
wins every day. At the end of your day, what went well? And so you have that in front of you, even for the morning. I just think what
Yeah.
went well, so that you have a chance to pay attention to your wins and not just the challenges that you face during every day. We all face both.
So one of the things that actually has been a blessing for me is what she
Stop
talks
sharing.
about is real and it works. However, it is so helpful for me to be able to then bounce the situation off. How do I? Because I don't get it right. And sometimes you sit by yourself, and as much as this makes sense, you just can't figure some of it out. You just can't figure out what exactly to say or what to do. So I have changed, as Ron said, and I appreciate the nice words, but I've changed because I've gone through it, but I've had the opportunity to share and ask, and what do I do and what is it? So I get a personal one-on-one consultation often. Right. So my thought is what I thought, and I started with is as a leader of loan officers, right? Is there something to go a little deeper with Sherry that says, I'd like to speak and become more skillful at how I can help my loan officers? Can I do a better job one-on-one using the scaling tool to be a more effective leader? And I think, what I'd like when Kate and I send out the small little survey, as a leader, would you like to learn more from what she's gone over to be a more effective leader to help your loan officers? As somebody on the ops side, is there something that says, wow, a lot of what she says makes a lot of sense to me. I'd love to have a dialogue because I'd like to be able to think and process and understand how I can use some of what she says to be more effective in what I do and how I support and how I work together as a team. And so what I'd like to do is when we send out this, Craig will help me along with Kate, is how can we do something where Dr. Sherry carves out a time to speak to you separately, loan officer, management, or ops, to continue to have to continue to kind of help you to refine some of the tools and questions that you have that are specific. So anyway, I appreciate what she does, and I'm a prototype of what I get to do, and I know how valuable it is. So thank you for doing what you've done today. It's been really valuable.
Does anybody have any more questions so that we make sure that it's collaborative? And
You have a few minutes to answer some of the questions that could come in.
yeah, of course.
All right. So folks, anyone that has questions, go ahead and fill it up in the queue. Dr. Sherry is going to try to field those questions the best she can. And by the way, Ron, have you paid your bill with Dr. Sherry? That's all I wanted to know.
You know what? It's a lifetime worth, and there's no dollar figure it's ever going to get paid. But I do make coffee in the morning and take out the trash most of the time.
Well,
Most of the time.
I think we got some comments here, Ron. Let me read a couple of the
Go ahead,
comments.
Doug. Let's fire off
Yeah,
those comments.
This is from Solomon. It says, just a thought from the conversation. Your emotional state determines your state of mind. Using the scaling tool to identify where we are before all activities can prevent us going into a fear or emotional response. Is this accurate for use of this tool as well?
Right. So I think that's a really great question, because we can take the scaling tool and we can say, you can look at 0 as, we always want to use, when we're using the scaling tool, we don't want to use vague terms. We want to use like, this is my worst day ever, this is my best day ever, because that's our way to get a gauge, right? Because So like you say, okay, like my emotional state determines your state of mind. So using the scaling tool, you could say, okay, what are some of the things that I have done, I might to get myself out of a fear response? What are some of the positive coping things that I've done to get myself out of that, and refer back to that list?
Yeah, awesome.
It's always
From-
referring back to what worked, because we forget that. We just start putting out fires, so we don't focus on what worked. Is it taking a walk around the block? Is it listening to your favorite song? Is it going to buy yourself a donut? I mean, what is it that you've done? Is it paying yourself at the end of a day for making 10 phone calls? I mean, I don't know what your budget is, but something like that. I mean, is there a way to better it when you're doing something that you don't really want?
Yeah, and here's one from Tito, who was an insurgent who brought donuts into our office one day. Anyway, and he screwed up my diet. He goes, those two fears of failure and rejection can lead to losing a lot of time of productive work. I would not nurture a lead with a realtor from fear of losing the relationship for the longest time. It wasn't until I sat down with Patrick to learn to nurture the relationship with the realtor as a partner that I got my time back in the day.
Good for
That's
you.
great comment,
That's
Tito.
really cool.
Don't bring donuts to the office. And Lance Powell, I have too many questions. This has been very valuable. I have mentioned to Ron many times, Dr. Cherry, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Karen says this was a great hour of power. Thank you, Dr. Sherry and Ron. Susan, not a question, just a note to Ron Garber. I thank you for the REO home I bought in 1997 in Anaheim Hills. It's where I still live, and that it led to me becoming a mortgage lender in 2004. Look at that. Who knows what kind of effect you're gonna have on life, right? Incredible.
Changing lives.
Yeah.
That's awesome,
John,
man. I gotta tell you,
John,
Dr. Cherry,
so,
it's always the best when you're on. I really
Thank you.
appreciate you. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
and look forward to maybe doing some more of these, especially if we get a good survey back for next steps. So
It's a thought
Thank you.
process. See, that's the whole thing. This is a thought process, and it's easy to move in the negative direction when you have a bad day. It's easy to forget some of those things, when you're not doing well or you're stressed out, or you forget that you're dumping on somebody, right? Where all of a sudden 2 days from now it's okay. It's something that you have to really continue to think about. And again, if that little tagline that she uses, is something that you put up there not to forget, or what do you say when you're having a miserable day?
Well.
That's right. But what do you say when you're having a miserable day? What do you say on a miserable day?
yeah, I say do this every time you're putting something in the internet. www.
What
went well? That's exactly
That'll,
right.
that'll be an anchor
it.
for you.
You got it.
Reading my mind. www.www. There you go.
There you go.
So, and by the way, you've done God's work with Ron Garber. I got to tell you, I can see its changes. It's been moving mountains, and you're doing a good job. We are very, very grateful.
Ron.
We're top of the hour here. Grateful again, as always. You are enlightening for everything that we see and hear, and all the great things you bring to the table for us. We're very appreciative of you, and wishing you a great weekend.
Yeah, you guys have a nice weekend too. Nice to see everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Sherry. I appreciate you.
Bye.
Take care.
Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Ron.